what year we're in. We are at our meeting of the Innovate 680 Policy Advisory Committee, and we are meeting exclusively via Zoom. And this is actually our 14th meeting of the PAC. And so Terry Ann is going to give us a wonderful video. So pay attention to this because you haven't seen enough of it lately. So here you go. Terry Ann, if you'd run the video, please.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom meeting pursuant to the provisions of Assembly Bill 361, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being live streamed on the CCTA website. The chair will call upon members, staff, and other speakers by name. Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members participating by Zoom wishing to speak should physically raise their hand and unmute their mic when called upon. Members should mute their mics when done speaking. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the Raise Hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. After 3 minutes, staff will lower their hand and mute their mic. Participants via phone will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice for public comment guidelines are printed on the meeting agenda. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And now let's move right on to our roll call. So Terry Ann, do you mind calling roll call since this is a Zoom meeting?
Yes, Member Foley for Allen.
Present.
Member Haskew.
Here.
Member Testa for Hernandez.
Here.
Member Obringer.
I'm here.
Member Perkins.
Here.
Member Stepper.
Here.
Vice Chair Nowak.
Here.
Chair Anderson.
I'm here.
Okay, and I believe we have members Carlson, Ross, and Storr absent.
I believe that is correct. And so we are going to move right on to public comment. Did we receive any public comment in advance?
We have not received any public comment.
Okay, and then my next question would be, is there anyone in the public who's with us this evening who would like to make any statements? And I am looking at my participants list. I am not seeing any virtual hands up, and I don't see any real hands up either. So I think we're in good shape. So let's move forward then. We have one item on our consent calendar, and this is to approve our minutes from our April 12th, 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion for approval for that?
I'd like to move approval of the minutes for the last meeting.
Okay.
I'll second approval.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. So we have a first by Stepper, a second by Obringer, and if you could please take a roll call vote.
Member Foley.
Aye.
Member Haskew.
Aye.
Member Testa.
Aye.
Member Obringer.
Yes.
Member Perkins.
Yes.
Member Stepper.
Aye.
Vice Chair Nowak.
Yes.
Chair Anderson.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with members Storr, Ross, and Carlson absent.
Okay, well, let's move right on then to our, I'm just looking to see if we've got the agenda. So first item, we're going to move right. I'm looking at this saying the agenda, and first discussion item is going to be informational, and we're going to have Stephanie presenting that to us. And so Stephanie, I'm going to let you move forward with this. This is the suite of projects, update on 680, focus on major activities.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. And just to note for everyone, normally Danielle Stanislaus is the stakeholder engagement manager, and she does a great job in facilitating these meetings for certain items. Just FYI, she's out today, so I'll be channeling her for this, so just bear with me. So for this update, Carlos, can you move on to the next slide? You guys are all very familiar with the program goals, as well as the next slide, which is the projects in the program. So if you can go to the next one, Carlos. You guys are all familiar with the 6 projects, so I won't go into each of them in detail, but I will have some notable updates for the next slide. So for northbound express lane completion, we have submitted the traffic operations analysis report, and it's been approved by Caltrans. Another significant milestone is that we submitted the administrative draft of the environmental document, as well as the draft project report to Caltrans for review. For part-time transit lane, I'll skip this one because there is an item dedicated to the project in the next one. So I will skip that for save it for later. The third project on the slide is shared mobility hubs. Staff has been continuing the conversation and discussion with County Connection, City of San Ramon, and Bishop Ranch about relocating the mobility hub that is originally envisioned at the park and ride lot at Bollinger Canyon Road to a better spot at Bishop Ranch. So that discussion is ongoing. And also happy to report that CCTA was successful in securing $3 million through the MTC Mobility Hub Grant for a small first phase at the Martinez Amtrak station. So that we just found out a couple weeks ago. Next slide. For the automated driving system project, the team continues to work with partners on the project, and staff is coordinated with County Connection staff on the county hospital project and developing the agreement with a vehicle vendor. For the MOS app, the project team is coordinating with the UC Berkeley Path on the protection connection component of the app, and also closely coordinating with Beep on the Presto operation at Bishop Ranch. And the team is also preparing for the pilot launch of the app later this year. For advanced technology, for the coordinated adaptive ramp metering or CARM, we are addressing comments from FHWA on the project ConOps and also the system engineering management plan documents. And they continue to coordinate with Caltrans staff on the shop ramp metering project and integrating our project with theirs. And then for the coordinated adaptive traffic signals or CATS, the team is finalizing the draft ConOps and hoping to release that document for review by our stakeholders in a few weeks. Next slide. I think that takes us to questions and comments. I'm happy to take any questions regarding the project updates that I provided.
Okay, does anyone here have any questions? That is a lot of information. We know we're moving quickly on this. So any questions first? I'll ask committee members. Not seeing any. I'm looking at the audience. Anyone who is not a committee member but present? I am not seeing any hands present. So any hands raised. So thank you. That's very helpful. And we are going to move right on. And this next item is also going to be presented, I believe, by Stephanie. And this is going to be some key takeaways from our site visit to Houston TransStar's Joint Transportation Management Center, which a few of us went to, and unfortunately, some of those people aren't here tonight. So Stephanie, why don't you lead it out? Because there were some,
Sure.
I had the privilege of going, and it was really a very interesting to see how well they do it in Houston, particularly in getting, as they call it, wrecks moved off the side of the freeway. They don't call them accidents, they call them wrecks, and how quickly they get the tow trucks out there and license those, and then just the coordinated center they have. But Stephanie, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson, for teeing it up. So yes, this is a quick update to the PAC members who didn't attend on the tour that occurred in May, basically. Next slide. So the attendees were Commissioner Arnerich from CCTA, as well as Ken Carlson. Commissioner Carlson is also a PAC member here, but as Chair Anderson noted, he's not present tonight. We also invited a few staff of MTC to join us, and also a couple of Caltrans staff joined us virtually on Zoom. The trip was back on May 1. You may recall that the Houston Transtar staff actually presented to us exactly a year ago in July 2022 about their facilities and their TMC. But during the tour, we were able to receive presentation from each of the entities that are co-locating at the TMC. They include the Texas DOT, City of Houston, Harris Counties, and then also the Houston Metro, which is a transit agency in Houston. Next slide. So the building that houses the TMC is owned by the Texas DOT, and the staff from each of those 4 agencies that I mentioned have presence at the TMC, which is shown on the left-hand side on the slide. They have a very robust incident management program, as Chair Anderson noted, and it's called Tow and Go. We actually, the conference room was sort of facing the TMC, so we actually were watching incidents being cleared live and really making sure they're timed underneath that 15-minute average recovery time that they sort of told us that's their goal. And I think the ones we saw met that goal of recovery time of under 15 minutes. So that was neat to see it in action. On the right-hand side is the Harris County Office of Homeland Security Emergency Operations Center. The building itself, so that was on the 2nd floor, I believe,
Yes.
from the building. So the TMC was on one floor and the EOC was another floor. And the building itself has the capacity to have water supply, generator power, and sleeping quarters to house those staff that are working on emergency response to stay in the building for weeks. And that can happen a few times a year, these emergencies, because they do get hurricanes. The building also is equipped to broadcast news directly from the EOC and the building to give updates to the public directly from the facility with latest information like evacuation and whatnot. So that was really neat. Next slide. So a few more key takeaways. The facility enables those 4 entities, state, county, city, to manage their traffic and operations and for them to coexist and for them to really easily coordinate and collaborate at one place. All the 4 entities contribute to the operation costs as shown on the right, and the pie chart there was taken from fiscal year 2022. It's not quite equally split, but very close enough. So they all contribute to the operational cost that is needed to run this facility. The facility is also a neutral ground for all these parties to come together to focus on solving problems and also making quick decisions, especially during emergencies. And they told us, stories about how they were able to come together and really not caring about what agencies they're from, and really tackle any problems that they need to fix, especially during emergencies. Next slide. So for us, with the lessons learned, next steps for Innovate 680 is that the team is hoping to look into the feasibility of a TMC for I-680 corridor, and maybe in the future hope can be scaled up to cover more of a countywide operation. We are also engaging with the MTC to see if there are opportunities for us to share lessons learned from our trip with their regional incident management task force. And then there's that question on the in red is mainly just to ask Chair Anderson, since Member Carlson's not here, if there were other takeaways that you thought you want to share that I missed, or anything that you want to share with the group.
I think you gave a really good summary. I think what I was most impressed with was the cooperativeness of these 4 different agencies that have very different missions. And you could tell in getting there was a little tension, that perhaps they didn't always agree with who had which role, but they figured out how to work through it. And that was really important. For me, the incident management was just fascinating to watch, because those wide screens, as Stephanie alluded to, showed you. These were cameras, live cameras from different freeways throughout Houston, where the people down on the floor could hone in on where there was an accident, dispatch, and they have contracts with multiple different tow drivers. It's not just Houston Transportation or Department of Transportation that is deploying tow trucks, but it's actually, they have contracts and give people a little regional area of where they can, where they will operate And their goal, as it should be, is to get people off the road as quickly as possible. And if they can tow them even off the freeway to fill them up with gas or to change a tire, that's what they're going to do to continue to get the flow of traffic there. And it's something where with MTC right there, some of us said, well, how can we get more of what we already have? The MTC does pay for a few roving trucks, and I've just forgotten the name of. I can see the beautiful yellow trucks. What are they called, Stephanie? MTC.
The FSP, the white trucks.
Are they white? I've
They're
seen
white.
They're white. Okay, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not colorblind. Anyway, so we have those out there, and they're very effective. But I would love to see more of those through that. And yes, if we can actually get our own. Someday our own TMC would be something that I think we could bring a lot of partners together and provide that redundant help even for an EOC, which all of our cities have, but we have major incidents where we could have even greater coordination. What I loved hearing from them, though, is when they were talking about watching our winter storms we had this year. They said, I don't know what you were calling them. In our country, we call those hurricanes. And you guys were just calling them, storms or, downpours. We said, we think those are hurricanes. So anyway, it was interesting to see how well they collaborate. There are some great opportunities, but with our goal to keep our freeways moving, and all of us know what an accident does to slow things down, having a better incident management is really, to me, a very crucial thing that I'd love to see us do, which shouldn't be that hard for us to do. I mean, it takes money, finding the right providers. And Scott's got his hand up.
Yes. How does the law enforcement agency that manages, how do they play into all this?
They are out there assisting, and they are out there reporting incidents as they come in. They are interacting with drivers who may be in distress, and they are part of the dispatch process. They don't just rely on the big screens to let people know that there's an incident, but law enforcement is very much a part. And of course, part of it is traffic enforcement, ensuring that you do have people obeying the law in that regard. And Stephanie, you may have more things you want to add to that question about the role.
Yeah, you answered it perfectly. They are always constantly speaking. It seems like they're on the floor. I may have forgotten to say that they have constant communication with their version of CHP. I don't know what the actual
Texas, and the Texas Rangers are out there. Got everyone out there.
Yeah, and they've dispatched their pool of the trucks, the tow trucks. They have a network of them that can call upon and send them out and just deploy them at the quickest speed possible to get these cars out, disabled vehicles out of the way. So they're involved with the process for sure.
Okay, and then of course there's an accident. They're there doing what they're supposed to be doing. Karen, please go ahead.
Just two quick questions. I mean, since I've been on the council in 2002, I can't imagine we've been discussing this. So it's very exciting to see what they're doing in Houston, because we've long wanted to see this. But the quick questions are the sleeping quarters. Do most people have sleeping quarters like that for emergencies over time, like a week in the cities here?
I think you might see more if it's attached to a fire district facility where you already have sleeping quarters, but I don't believe, and I'm trying to think that our new sheriff's EOC, I believe, has some. So but in Houston too, where they're talking about hurricanes, and they actually cited this above a floodplain. Everything's a little flat in Houston, but they assured me that they were well far away from flood zones. But yeah, that's a way where they can just be completely embedded. And also, if you're talking about terrorist attack or something else, there's almost this mentality that they might be locking down this facility to control whatever needs to be happening in that area.
And the second question was, how are they sharing the cost? It wasn't quite equal, so I figured there was a basis, those four agencies.
I don't have the exact answer for that. Yeah, it's not exactly equal.
Well, there's a pie chart, and I think it really.
I don't remember saying exactly how they calculated the split.
Well, in the future, when we discuss this, then you can ask that question.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, there was some, I recall them saying it as they first came together, that was something they really had to work out. And it,
Mhm.
as well as how many personnel can be cited there, because of course, this is just one of many places where they might be. But yeah, it seems.
I guess I'm just surprised that they almost looked equal. I mean, they weren't
Yes.
completely, but very, very
Yeah.
close. And I thought, well, the agencies probably are not all the same size. So in the future, we can look
But
at
they're
that.
not. And Public Works for the city of Houston has a very different role than some of the others. But nevertheless, they're there because they're managing the traffic signals. They're the ones who are managing road repairs, all kinds of things. So they're a very integral part. But you sensed a little that Public Works had a little resistance sometimes, it sounded like, with some of what was going on. So it was just sort of an interesting vibe you picked up.
Oh, well, then I'll just add how critical Public Works were to those mudslides in Danville on January 1st. So
Public Works do a phenomenal job, and they're still doing a phenomenal job as we're trying to get some slides still repaired in this county.
thank you.
Our new EOC in San Ramon on Crow Canyon Road will have sleeping quarters.
Okay.
It's part of the design to have sleeping quarters.
Yeah, because
for
you
extended-
really are around the clock. I mean, that's just the reality. You could be 72 hours a week or two, and people do need to rest. So thanks, God. Okay, Sue.
So my question really is, I remember, I think, talking to Tim when you guys got back, that there's a sense it's a little easier to coordinate. It's basically Houston, which is sort of massive county. But with 680, we don't have one big city. We've got lots of cities and towns along the way. Where did you guys see the challenges in the Houston Transtar when they were talking about it? We were thinking, oh, that's going to be a little bit more difficult on the 680 corridor. And we've got 2 counties. We've got, I don't know how many towns, cities. Were there other things that while you were there sort of raised a flag saying this is going to be a little bit more challenging for us to do?
What came to me was we're still a little bit siloed. And so, with our freeways, pretty much CHP is law enforcement. And so that worked pretty well. But of course, once you get off the freeway, we do rely on city police. But as far as with MTC having great control over our express lanes and having the state sort of over the freeway, but CCTA playing such an important role in funding our repairs on the freeway. To me, it was sort of, we've got silos, and how do we break down those silos to get everyone to agree that A, this is a good idea, B, who is the right entity to manage it? We're sort of assuming CCTA because that's one of the most unifying forces we have in this county that really not every county has, where we really have a lot of faith and confidence by our cities in our Contra Costa Transportation Authority. And then it's, where do you cite it? And then just obviously the funding and where would that come from? But to me, I was left with, how do we bring everyone on board and to give up a little bit of their autonomy or their sovereignty over it. And so you as an MTC commissioner, I'm going to rely on you, Sue, if we move forward with this, to help MTCC say, we're ceding all of our responsibility here. I mean, it's going to be important to have that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're going to have our first regional network management meeting Friday, which will be an interesting first meeting. And it is interesting in just initial preliminary discussions, Contra Costa is very well thought of in this whole process because of some of the coordination efforts already taking place, whether it's CCTA or the transit agencies, things like that. So, Contra Costa is a little ahead of the game on some of this. So I know MTC sort of respects where we've been and what we've done so far. So I think that's helpful in the discussion process.
Yeah, and again, I would see us moving forward. I always love to start things as a pilot. Everyone loves a pilot because there's
more pilots going on than anything else.
Well, it sounds.
I wish I'd seen some of them turn into reality. I mean, there are pilots going on for 5 years. I mean, I'm like,
yeah, but it's just a pilot, so you can't object. No. Again, there are a lot of things we're doing where I think I think it has great potential. I think too, even as you just brought up buses, the whole transit situation, where even on the 680 corridor, we have 3 or 4 transit operators there as well. So that just adds another wrinkle of operation. But as you point out, we get along really well and collaborate really well in this county. Stephanie, anything else you had? Okay, any other questions by anyone? Such an agreeable group. Okay, then we are going to move right along. Oh, except I didn't ask if there's any public comment. And Terry, and did we get any members of the public sending any emails or comments? I don't think we did, or she.
Sorry, no public comment written or verbal.
And I've not seen any hands up, so we are good. Now we're going to move right on to our next item. This is also going to be informational, and Hisham is going to be presenting this. It's about a project update on Innovate 680 part-time transit lanes, transit bus and shoulder project. And then also, we're really delighted to have Peter Thompson with the San Diego Association of Governments, who is on the Interstate 805 State Route 94 transit bus and shoulder pilot project down there. And so I know this has been in operation for not too long a time, but we're excited to hear more about how it's working in San Diego.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll kick this one off before giving Peter the floor to present the project. Next slide, please. Next one as well. So the part-time transit lane project on northbound 680 is the first phase. We're thinking about applying the project. It runs from Bollinger Canyon to Ignacio Valley Road between San Ramon and Walnut Creek. Basically, it's about 12-mile section. The reason we picked it is because speeds consistently fall below 35 miles per hour. So you have congestion for more than an hour a day, especially during the PM peak period. Also, this is where buses could actually save travel time if they use the shoulder. We anticipate that the buses will save at least 6 minutes if T-bus is implemented in this corridor. The average travel time they have now is about 24 minutes for the 12-mile section, which is double what it should be during free flow conditions. With T-bus, because of the limitation on the speed, on how fast you can go on the shoulder, which is 35 miles per hour, their travel time will go down to about 18 minutes. So there is substantial savings if the project is implemented on northbound 680. The corridor, you're familiar probably with the corridor more than anybody else. So you have about 13 interchanges. Most of the off-ramps are one lane except for 3 of them at Crow Canyon and Sycamore and Highway 24. Those 3 have 2-lane off-ramps. Most of the traffic volumes at the off-ramps are less than 1,000 vehicles per hour, except for Crow Canyon and Olympic and 24, where they're just above 1,000. That's critical because that was a value that was mentioned in Caltrans T-bus guidance. In terms of transit service in the corridor, County Connection runs 3 express bus routes in the corridor. On average, we have and LAFTA has 1 express bus route in the corridor. Plus, there is the free shuttle that County Connection runs to Rosamore. So about 7 buses per hour currently use the corridor. In the future, the plan is to increase those to 13 by increasing the frequency of those express buses from 30 minutes to 15 minutes. Also, adding more shuttle service from the park and ride lots to the BART stations. So with that, a lot relies on the transit bus on shoulder guidance that will be issued by Caltrans. We're still waiting for it. We've seen a draft. The guidance will determine basically what design features can we have on the project, how much technology we should have, whether it's required that the buses communicate with the RAM meters or not. Issues like that are discussed in the guidance. Also, we will talk a little bit about the testing and training at Momentum Station, and then I'll turn it to Peter to talk about his pilot in San Diego. Next slide, please. So the bid for the project, the northbound express lane part-time transit lane, was approved on March 23rd, 2023. We plan to start the environmental document early in 2024. Currently, the bid estimated the cost of the project to be anywhere between, the construction cost to be anywhere between $10 to $20 million, depending on how much technology we put in the project. The more technology we add in, the more expensive it'll be towards the higher end. And as I mentioned, we really need that guidance from Caltrans to help us decide on the design features for the projects. And at this point, we are, we received $2 million in TERCEP funding last year to do testing and training for transit bus on shoulder at the Momentum Station. Next slide, please. I forgot to mention that we do have about $6 to $7 million between RM3 and Measure J for the part-time transit lane. However, if the cost estimate turns out to be towards the 20 million, then we need to go out and look for funding. The goal is to have the project ready for construction by 2026. With the testing and training at Momentum Station, we basically cut the $2 million to test operational scenarios and technologies at Momentum and have a platform for operator training. We met with a group of stakeholders, including Caltrans, the CHP, County Connection, MTC, and Caltrans headquarters, to talk about basically what type of testing we want to do at Momentum Station, what scenarios we should test for. And the goal, we met on June 28th, I believe, and with their input, we're going to put together basically an RFP to procure a consultant to help us plan for the testing and oversee it, as well as oversee any improvements we need to do at Momentum to simulate real life conditions, basically. In terms of schedule, the goal is to go in the fall and issue the RFP and have somebody basically in October, November timeframe to help us develop the plan and basically design the operating procedures. And then the testing will take place a year from now, or from October, for about a couple of years. The goal is, to have the testing done by the time the part-time transit lane project on 680 is operational. Next slide. As I mentioned, these are the stakeholders that we are working closely with. I forgot to mention FHWA. They were at the meeting as well. And we also invited San Diego to learn from their experience on the pilot. And we can move to the next slide. And I mentioned San Diego, so I'm going to turn it to Peter shortly to talk about their experience with the pilot. The goal is really to learn from their experience. We are scheduling a tour on October 25th to go and see the operations in person. And hopefully that will be educational to all of us to help us implement T-Bus, not just on 680, but also in other corridors in the Bay Area. I know there is an interest to implement it on I-80 as well. So with that, I'll turn it to Peter, who graciously agreed to be here to give us the presentation. Peter?
Thanks, Hisham.
You're welcome.
All right, so good evening. Peter Thompson's my name, and I'm the project manager for the Interstate 805 State Route 94 part-time transit-only lanes pilot project. I'd like to thank the Innovate 680 committee for requesting this presentation. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the pilot is funded by the Federal Transit Administration and delivered through a partnership between SANDAG, Caltrans, the Metropolitan Transportation System, CHP, the cities of Chula Vista, and National City. And so the partners have worked closely together over the last 5 years through the planning, design, and construction phases of the project, and will all remain engaged over the next 3 years of operations through final evaluation and on our path to providing input to statewide guidance. Next slide, please. So as a pilot, we're seeking to better understand 3 primary aspects, whether prioritizing the use of existing infrastructure can improve the reliability of the bus rapid transit system. Next, we're seeking to better understand whether the pilot can effectively address the safety, enforcement, and maintenance concerns that were raised during the planning phase. And lastly, we're seeking to better understand whether the technologies and infrastructure improvements can deliver benefits that outweigh the costs. Next slide. The South Bay 225 is San Diego's most recent bus rapid transit service. A map of the entire route is provided on the right-hand side. And so in the morning, the Rapid 225 provides service from the border to downtown, and in the evening, in the reverse, from downtown back to the border. The pilot itself is a much smaller 7-mile portion of this larger route and is delivered in phases. For the first 90 days, phase 1 was restricted to a single on-ramp and 2 freeway-to-freeway connectors seen here in yellow. For the balance of the 3-year pilot, phase 2 extends the available transit-only lanes to its full 7-mile length, seen here in pink. Next slide. The pilot has procured a dedicated fleet of 17 vehicles and outfitted these and the roadside with 3 types of technology. One that aims to help the bus driver by warning them of potentially dangerous situations. Another that allows the bus to talk with the ramp meters directly. And lastly, dynamic signage at the ramp limit bar that lights up to warn a commuter a bus is merging. The pilot vehicles are operated by a dedicated pool of 60 professional drivers, and all drivers have completed both in-classroom training and hands-on road certification. Drivers are trained to use the part-time transit-only lanes only during the peak hours, only when the freeway is operating below 35 miles per hour, never during inclement weather, never faster than 35 miles an hour in the lanes, and never more than 15 miles an hour faster than the adjacent general purpose lanes. Operators are taught to always yield to emergency response vehicles, enforcement and maintenance vehicles, disabled vehicles, and large debris. Next slide. So SANDAG, we conducted a public awareness campaign on 3 separate occasions leading up to the use of the transit-only lanes, with billboards, bilingual radio spots, digital marketing, geofenced ways alerts, press engagements, and through e-newsletters. The press coverage was really very positive, with all San Diego's media and print outlets engaging. And so if you can go to the next slide, we've got a short video that provides you an overview. You can play that, please.
San Diegans will experience something exciting with the new innovative Bus on Shoulder project, brought to you by Sandag, Caltrans, and MTS. The 3-year pilot project will help maintain travel times for the South Bay Rapid Route 225 between the Otay Mesa Port of Entry and downtown San Diego. Specially trained bus drivers can bypass slow traffic on Interstate 805 and State Route 94 by driving safely on freeway shoulders during traffic congestion. This is our region's first use of vehicle-to-infrastructure technology, so buses can communicate with ramp meters through sensors that provide audio and visual alerts to the driver to help avoid potential conflicts. Safety is our first priority. Bus drivers will only enter the shoulder if travel lanes operate under 35 miles per hour and won't exceed 35 miles per hour on the shoulder. Commuters should be alert, observe traffic laws, and never follow buses into the shoulder. But don't worry if you need to pull over. Shoulders will always be available for law enforcement and emergencies. Data from the project will help modernize the region's transportation system, making it safer, more accessible, and sustainable. Learn more at busonshoulder.sandag.org.
Thanks. If we can go back to the presentation. Much appreciated. So look, as you've just heard, the objective of the project was to evaluate whether we can provide a travel time reliability to our rapid transit users. In this section, I'm going to provide a snapshot of where the pilot stands at the end of the first 12 months of operations. Next slide, please. So this plot gives visibility to our AM peak hour trips. The AM peak hour it's notable in the fact that for operators, there are significantly more transit-only lanes available and more on and off ramps for them to traverse. Shown here are the total recorded trips. And so in pink are those trips where the operator elected to use some portion of the transit-only lanes. And in blue are those trips where the operator did not use any portion of the lanes. It's worthwhile noting here the variability between the recorded trips and the scheduled trips. So the scheduled trips is that horizontal bar that's yellow there, just under 200 trips per month. And so as with many of the transit service providers over the last couple of years, MTS has faced systemic staffing shortages. And then more recently on this route, we were impacted by a driver's strike. So that's, that sort of certainly speaks to the length of this pilot over the 3 years. We want to normalize those types of events that are occurring. Next slide, please. So again, the operators are not mandated to use the lanes. From this chart, we can see the average aggregate statistics for those who voluntarily choose to use some portion of the pilot corridor. In the 3 radial dials up in the top right, we can see that operators are achieving an average speed a little over 28 miles per hour when they are in the lanes. We can also see that during congested periods, operators are spending on average about 1:17 in the lanes. And lastly, operators are covering, again in aggregate, roughly a half mile to get around the worst of the recurring congestion. So while those numbers may appear low, they demonstrate that operators are using the part-time transit-only lanes judiciously, rather than getting into the shoulder and just sticking there as if these were dedicated lanes. So this is a good outcome. Next slide, please. We've trained our operators to use the lanes only when they're available. And so this training informs the operator that they should check the red-green indicator mounted on the left pillar before entering the lanes. Red is obviously no, don't use the lanes. Green is obviously the lanes are available. Corridor availability can be impacted by weather, CHP CAD reported incidents, pilot and partner system outages, and any administrative decisions. So here we can see that over the last 12 months, and remember this is a pilot that has just started, we're relatively pleased that the corridor has been available for 60% of those peak hour period, that peak hour period. So, yeah, we're pleased. Next slide, please. So, with 12 months of operational data available, we can now begin answering some of the transit reliability questions this pilot is seeking to better understand. FTA's Travel Time Reliability Index is used with a single modification. Rather than evaluating bus versus car travel time, here we're comparing trips where the operator used the lanes in blue at the bottom versus operators who chose not to use the lanes in pink at the top. Interpreting this plot is relatively simple. A higher index score indicates greater variability and therefore less reliability, which tells us that the operators who are choosing to use the lanes are consistently delivering more reliable trips to their customers. Again, a great outcome after 12 months. Next slide, please. So to be honest, this is the second time San Diego has piloted the bus on shoulders concept. The natural question then is, why pilot a second time, and what's different? Today, there really are significant advances in the availability and capabilities of off-the-shelf technologies that can address the key lessons learned from the first pilot. Next slide, please. Well, a bit of an eye chart. The challenge for these off-the-shelf technologies is threefold. First, they must support the operator, not replace them. Second, they must be capable of delivering vehicle priority within what is a very unique setting, i.e. priority at the ramp meters. And lastly, they must work in unison to mitigate the potential for hazardous situations to occur in that conflict zone. Next slide. All 17 of the pilot vehicles we procured for this pilot have been outfitted with 3 major systems. An advanced driver assistance system, which has been designed specifically for transit vehicle operators. The selected system uses cameras and radars to assist operators with forward collision warnings, pedestrian and cyclist collision warnings, lane departure warnings, headway monitoring, and blind spot warnings. Pilot vehicles are also outfitted with the connected vehicle radios, and these FCC regulated radios are able to securely communicate the location, heading, and speed of the vehicle to the ramp meter 10 times a second. And then lastly, we've also installed the subsystems that allow us to give that red-green feedback to the operator, which confirms really in real time whether the lanes are available for use. More importantly, in this context, when they're not available. Next slide. Next is the technology that's been installed adjacent to our on-ramps. And so from left to right here at the top, a connected vehicle or V2X roadside unit that communicates securely with the radio on the bus and receives a request for transit signal priority. The second is just underneath, and this is an AI-enabled traffic camera capable of distinguishing MTS buses from other vehicles. In the middle, we really have generally the systems responsible for making the actual request to the ramp meter controller over an air gap. And lastly, on the far right-hand side, we've deployed bus blankout signs at the ramp stop bar. These help the commuter waiting at the stop bar for up to an additional 15 seconds. Typically, it lives in and around the 7 to 9 second additional delay. But there can be up to 15 seconds. But it helps them understand exactly why they're waiting a little bit longer. Next slide. So again, this is a bit of an eye chart. You have my apologies, but it's important information. And it speaks to one of the earlier comments I heard the committee members make related to pilots that stay as pilots evermore. During the planning phase of this project, we developed a concept of operations, obviously. And through that work, we identified the need for detailed data and information from 6 of our partner agencies' systems. Having delivered the US DOT's Integrated Corridor Management pilot in 2013 meant that we had existing access to most of the data we required for this Bus on Shoulders project. And so this included data from CHP's public CAD, computer-aided dispatch, the National Weather Service's environmental monitoring stations, Caltrans ramp metering system, their lane closure system, and their advanced transportation management system. And then finally, we already had robust access to MTS, the transit provider. We had access to their regional transit management system. So from an institutional perspective, why is this eye chart and the corresponding wonky conversation about what computers are talking to other computers important? And hopefully I'm going to answer that in the next 3 slides. Next slide, please. Over the last 5 years, it's been my very real pleasure to work closely with more than 20 CHP officers assigned to this project. It should be of no surprise to anybody that our partners at CHP are no advocates of Bus on Shoulders projects. We are, after all, operating in their office. From the outset, our local CHP leadership have expressed genuine and heartfelt concern about the potential for conflict between pilot vehicles and patrol officers. As such, throughout the planning and design phases of the project, we've made many, many decisions under the premise that officer safety was paramount. We made multiple technology and operational decisions to address those concerns that we could control, like installing the advanced driver assistance system on the pilot vehicles to help our operators have a second set of eyes, or using the availability indicator, that red-green lights, to completely vacate the 7-mile corridor when officers were actively working on an incident on any portion of the corridor. We also deployed technology to monitor the tabled concerns we heard from our local CHP officers, those concerns that we couldn't control. So next slide. During the planning phase, we heard this new term from our captain. The term was copycatters. The captain helped us understand that if commuters were seeing MTS vehicles using the part-time transit-only lanes, then this could remove the stigma about use of the shoulder as a general travel lane. So we evaluated what it would take to monitor this. The project team spent 6 months testing that new AI camera that was highlighting there on the roadside, and essentially making sure that the technology would help us report out to CHP on whether we were actually experiencing this increase in copycatter events. Yeah, look, on the slide, not the best images, I'll be honest, but what you can see essentially is these virtual zones being identified and lighting up. And each of those are assigned for the camera to recognize what type of vehicle is passing underneath and then classifying that vehicle correctly. So it's correctly classifying or not classifying the bus as a copycat vehicle, but it does identify CHP vehicles as copycatters. So we were focused on tracking and reporting the captain's concern. Next slide, please. This bar chart shows the monthly rate per hour of copycat violations in the AM peak period. On average, we're experiencing about 1 to 2 shoulder violations per hour at most locations. Notable in this plot are the elevated rates in June and October. These 2 months were when when the project was conducting CHP supported training through the corridor. So the timing of this project was significantly impacted by COVID. And so at the point that we were on the path to going live, we had nowhere near the congestion that we do on a typical day. I think everybody has experienced that. So we contracted with CHP to help support training runs through the corridor so the drivers could be certified. And that's really where these elevated rates are coming from. Next slide. So in the first year of the pilot, we're focused on the technical lessons learned. When we go into the second year of the pilot, we'll very much so focus on reporting out on the operational lessons learned. And then in the final year, the project's final report will focus on all three: technical, operational, and institutional lessons learned. Next slide, please. So the first three of these lessons learned aim to highlight the benefits we're seeing from having selected connected vehicle technology to implement transit signal priority at the Caltrans ramps. Had we elected to use standard vehicle detection technologies like loops, we believe that from what we are witnessing in the operational environment, we would certainly have seen an elevated number of conflict events occurring at the end of the ramp. Having spoken earlier to the benefits of having deployed a video detection system to address CHP concerns, what I didn't highlight in that discussion was the fact that we're using those cameras as redundant detection for the transit signal priority at the Caltrans ramps. Again, we're using that system to reduce the reportable events of conflicts at the end of the ramp. The next lesson learned on using human-centered design speaks to the bus operator acceptance of the advanced driver assistance system that we've seen, having used the off-the-shelf product design specifically for transit vehicles. And so we have conducted a driver survey, and of the 60 drivers that work on this route, 55 drivers responded to the survey. And so that sort of level of response is unprecedented. What we're hearing from the drivers is, finally somebody is bringing technology into the cabin that helps us. And so they're very much so engaged. And we've seen that pivot to their acceptance of driving in the transit-only lanes. We gave them something, and ultimately they're finding opportunities to use those lanes because they've engaged with the project. And then I think the data collected from the integrated system accelerates confidence with project stakeholders. This speaks to the work that we did under the Integrated Corridor Management Project, bringing together the 29 command and control systems from across San Diego and having them all speak together and share their information. We built that confidence in that system in 2013. We've therefore gone through almost a decade now of people understanding what that system does, how it works. And ultimately, it was our first opportunity really to leverage that system to make to give us the opportunity to focus on bus on shoulders operations as opposed to systems data. And then, as expected, multi-stakeholder steering committee teams take time to gel and provide guidance, and partnering with the team. The last three certainly talk about the vendor selection, the systems integrator that needs to bring all of these systems together and make them function so that you're not distracted by the systems. You can focus on the operations of the part-time transit-only lanes. So with that, I'd like to pause and ask if anybody's got any questions.
Okay, let's go ahead and take down, Sue's got her hand up. So Sue, why don't you go first?
So, Hisham, you talked about using Momentum for testing and training. I'm curious, what did you do in San Diego as far as where you tested and trained?
Yeah, understood. So, Commissioner Nowak, the training occurs, well, let me see. We developed a train the trainer program. So essentially, most bus operations have professional training staff on staff. And so we completed a train the trainer program. We trained all of their professional transit operator trainers, and then really that's the extent of it. The training itself, when it's delivered, this is sort of a 5:30 in the morning classroom-based training that 3 drivers will go into. They'll go through an hour of classroom-based instruction, and then they walk straight out of that onto a training bus. And each of those 3 drivers is then asked to drive the entire corridor, at which point they're considered certified. In terms of testing the technology, again, it's good that this is all technology that's off the shelf. So the technology itself is, has demonstrated through market acceptance that it is, it is valid equipment. We then went through the process of installation and acceptance testing to make sure that it was working. The only thing that we did specific testing on was the AI camera, or additional testing on was the AI-based camera. We installed that for a period of 6 months before we went live to go through and make sure that it wasn't going to give us false positives.
And so, Hisham, how much of this can we learn from and not have to duplicate processes or learning for our own project?
Yeah, that's a great question, Commissioner. That's why we're hiring consultants to help us prioritize what we want to test at Momentum Station. One of the consultant task is to look at other implementations, not just in San Diego, but elsewhere in the country, to see what has been tested, what the CHP concerns are, and what needs to be retested at Momentum stations. There might be also newer technologies that we want to test that haven't been implemented elsewhere yet. So I cannot answer you now until we have somebody on board with the right experience and the benefit of having looked at all the technologies out there, plus the input from our stakeholders to prioritize what we want to test. We're not going to have enough money to test every technology. I mean, it's only $2 million. And we want to use some of that for the training as well. So some prioritization will have to take place. In my opinion, we will try to not repeat whatever has already been proven. I mean, that's why we invited District 11, which is San Diego, to our stakeholder meetings, because now we know that how buses can communicate with RAM meters, and they've done it successfully in San Diego. So we just want to make sure that District 4 can do it here and learn from that experience.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, other questions from anyone on the committee? We're such an agreeable group this evening. It was a very comprehensive report. How about anyone in the audience? Any questions by anyone in the audience this evening? The general public?
I think Julie had her hand raised.
Oh, Julie, you didn't pop to the top corner yet, so thank you. Go ahead.
I apologize. I was slow. I'm curious, is there any concern that, I can't even remember where it was, but not too long ago, and I think it was in Southern California, I was shocked that so many drivers were in traffic just using the shoulder, just blasting past, and I believe it was completely illegal, but it seemed to be a pretty common phenomenon that had started. And I kind of wonder that if buses are doing this, that it might send the message to people that it's okay to do this. And so have we seen that happen? And is there that concern, and what would be done? I think it would almost be unfair to, I mean, you'd have to ticket, but it seems almost unfair because it seems like the messaging would be that this is an okay practice.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Peter, please jump in at any point if you want to add anything, but it is definitely a concern, and the concern that's the CHP expressed, that's what why Peter was talking about the copycat that follow us. And, you know, a lot of the technologies aim to that, to see how severe that problem is. And hopefully that will help the CHP decide what to do. What we can do besides the technology is clear signage, basically, on the shoulder to say, buses only. In some situations, sometimes the buses themselves have cameras and signs to basically warn other drivers not to use the shoulders. Besides that, an extensive education campaign would be needed to make sure it doesn't happen. But even with all of that, you'll still have people who will violate the rules and drive on the shoulders when they shouldn't.
I was going to say, for those of us who are in San Francisco driving sometimes, you deal with that all the time in downtown San Francisco, where suddenly it's a bus only lane, and you just have to be aware. And again, doesn't mean people won't do what they're not supposed to do, but I think certainly if we focus primarily on our education, a little bit of engineering, and then the enforcement, the message will get out there. But Peter, did you have anything you wanted to add with in response to Councilmember Tessa's concerns?
Yes, Chair Anderson, Commissioner Testa, it really is a foundational conversation for running one of these projects. And so the reason it took us 5 years to get through the planning, design, and construction of this project, a big portion of that was going through the California Traffic Control Devices Committee, essentially to get that signage, the unique signage for part-time transit-only lanes, to get it established for our corridor. And so from that perspective, The technology that the cameras that we've deployed to monitor, while it is only preliminary information, the baseline that we captured for monitoring copycatters between March 2022 and June 2022, when we went live, it actually showed a drop in those locations once bus on shoulder operations started. So that could be a factor of what Chair Anderson is talking about, the focused public outreach campaign that happened around the time that we went live. But over these 3 years, we should be able to definitively say whether there was an impact, whether we do see that that normalization of use of part-time transit-only lanes actually encouraging the public to use them in violation.
Did that answer your question, Julie? Anything else?
Thank you. And I did hear the copycat, and I was discussion. I was trying to understand if that's what we were talking about, was the public using the lane. I thought it was other vehicles, but okay. Yes, thank you. I still can't imagine that it isn't going to open up an awful lot of confusion. But
And we often do. That's part of our job. We try not to. Luella, please go ahead.
The first question is, now that the CHP is working with you and you've already tested this out, is there still the same CHP resistance that there was to start with? And I have another question, but let's start with that one. And
I'm not, is there anyone from CHP on here tonight? Usually we do have one of our commanders, or otherwise I'm not seeing anyone. And usually they're pretty good about telling us what they think. So
there's Sean Weckenfeld. He's from CHP, but I'm not sure if he's ready to speak on that topic. But
okay, well, Sean, if you want to say anything about how you feel the dialogue's going, please go ahead.
There we go. Sorry, it wouldn't let me unmute earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we've got good communication for the program going on right now. I know Captain Mosier, myself, and Lieutenant Hill were on a stakeholder meeting regarding the driver training. I think we're on the right path. I think we've got good communication. We're part of helping to get this training set up, and I really think we're on a good path right now.
Thank you. And we appreciate CHP's willingness to look at this, and more importantly, to be part of the solution. So thank you. And then your next question 2, Luella.
Because I like intuitive questions, it's generally this far into the test. Do you think your conclusion is going to be that this is a good solution for some of our traffic issues, and that we will see it in not only your area, but our area and pretty much the rest of the United States?
That's for Peter. Peter, how successful do you feel you are?
Look, I think the preliminary indications, the things that we're monitoring, are showing that the pilot will document a success. The statewide guidance looks at a travel time savings of between 5 and 15 minutes for these types of operations. And we are, well, while I was showing you the travel time reliability index, other analysis is showing us that our drivers are experiencing about a 6-minute benefit in their typical run speeds. So look, I mean, from that perspective, from my position, I believe we'll be able to document a successful pilot, yes.
Thank you. One more question. Unmute yourself one more time.
Yeah, about the 35-mile limit that the buses have, and whether they have to stay within a certain bandwidth between the regular traffic.
15 miles, I think it was.
Yeah. What's the point of that when they could go scooting down the side and get people home 20 minutes earlier?
Yeah, Commissioner Haskew, it's safety. It really is safety. when you're traveling on the bus during congested conditions, 35 miles an hour isn't fast, but it's also not slow. And so from that perspective, the traffic engineers working on the project certainly were focused on 35 miles an hour being a safe speed to be able to travel in the lanes. But that does drop down. I mean, this is why the average there was 28 miles per hour. That does drop down when cars are queued, not moving at all. So the bus at that point is dropping down to 15 miles an hour. So yeah, it's a safety consideration.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Other questions by anyone on the commission? I am not seeing any hands by commissioners. What about the general public who is here? Others? No additional questions. Well, thank you so much, Hisham and Peter, for this really interesting presentation. And I hope many of the members of this committee are going to be able to go down to San Diego and see this in real life in a couple months from now. So thank you. We are now going to move on another informational item, and Stephanie is going to be presenting that since Danielle is not with us. And that is just going to be the Interstate 680 Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. And yes, I'm actually covering for Danielle, who was covering for Caltrans staff who were unable to provide the presentation today. This is an informational item to seek your feedback, so I will take it back to Caltrans staff and Danielle when they're back. We are embarking on an effort called the Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan, or CMCP, and this effort requires stakeholder and public engagement. And so, like I said, this is an informational item, not for your action, but to provide feedback in development of this plan. Next slide. So the CMCP is a corridor plan that's done to identify needs of a corridor, and accompanying it would be a project list to address those needs that were identified. Caltrans is required by law to do long-range planning for highway corridors in the state, and also a completed CMCP is required for certain funding opportunities, such as the Solution for Congested Corridor program under SB1. And so therefore, a project must be included in a CMCP in order to apply for funding under that program. Next slide. So both the California Transportation Commission and Caltrans have provided guidance on how to develop a CMCP. It is an 8-step process as shown in this diagram. Currently, the 680 CMCP is for Contra Costa, I should say, is in steps 2 through 4, which includes gathering information, data, conducting baseline assessment, and identifying projects that could be included in the corridor plan. Next slide. Yeah, you can do next slide, but it's got a little, yep, thanks. The corridor plan includes the entire limit within Contra Costa on 680, but it is not just focused on the freeway. It would be including all modes of travel. We'd be looking at the local streets within a 1 mile buffer, transit services such as BART, Express Bus, local bus services, and Amtrak. Bike ped crossing and parallel facilities like the Iron Horse Regional Trail will also be looked at, and also any park and ride lots and shared mobility hubs will be included in the development of this plan. Next slide. Caltrans is leading the CMCP effort with CCTA collaborating closely. The effort started around this time last year, and in the springtime, we completed the identification of goals, objectives, and performance measures that we'll be using. And as of today, I know that Caltrans has completed the corridor overview chapter. We're also developing the project list at the moment, and we'll soon start with evaluation of the projects and prioritizing them. The draft CMCP is anticipated to be released in the fall for review, and then the stakeholder engagement process noted in that orange banner is to be taking place throughout the whole CMCP effort. Next slide. The CMCP 680 goals are shown on this slide, and they are consistent with the Innovate 680 program goals, which you are familiar with, as we usually start that first slide in our PAC meeting, because these goals, the Innovate 680 goals, are already been vetted through you all and different stakeholders that we've engaged engaging with for the past 2-3 years, there wasn't any reason to revamp these or reinvent the wheel. In addition, these goals are very consistent with the state's transportation plan goals, the climate action plan goals, and also the regional MTC Plan Bay Area Regional Transportation Plan, or the RTP goals. And then based on these goals, performance measures for the projects that we will evaluate will be developed to see how consistent or how they meet these goals. Next slide. The CMCP team has been developing the project list, and they've vetted through various documents like the RTP, the bike ped projects that are in our countywide transportation bike ped plan, and then other shop projects that Caltrans have on the books, and other projects or strategies that are meaningful to the corridor have also been included in this list that has been developed. Next slide. So part of the CMCP process is also identify, one key component is to identify corridor needs or focus areas. And the bullet list here is just an example of what could be a focus area or needs. And since you all are very familiar with the corridor, tonight we're just gathering information or gathering feedback of what you all think would be a good focus areas to look into or corridor needs for us to address and investigate. Next slide. So the following 2-3 slides are sort of examples of what could be corridor needs. So one could be climate change adaptation to address sea level rise, especially for those communities that are along the waterfront. Next slide. Environmental considerations such as wildfires, that's more common now with summertime, and also evacuation planning to address the wildfires. And next slide would be showing the equity considerations for the underserved or disadvantaged communities along the corridor. Next slide. The next steps for the CMCP is that Caltrans team will continue to compile the corridor needs and projects list, or projects to be included on the list, finalizing the performance assessment. And then CCTA and Caltrans are actually collaborating on stakeholder and public outreach, as that's a very key component to the CMCP development. We've put together a pretty robust communication game plan, and really leveraging all the committees that CCTA has and also Innovate 680 has within the program, leveraging all those committees that we already have in place and doing the outreach through those established committees. And also Caltrans is also leveraging on the existing plan that CCTA asked to do a summer series, which has already started, and they would be interested in coming to some of these events to get inputs about the CMCP from the public. Next slide. So the slide here shows, I think one more click, it's missing. Oh, you have to click many times then. This list is all the events that are going on this summer along the 680 corridor. So again, Caltrans staff will be leveraging some of these to get some input from public about the corridor and the needs and what are their concerns about the corridor. I think they're shooting for the ones in San Ramon, Concord, and Martinez as of now. And then you'll be seeing us CCTA staff in these events as well for our own outreach and education for CCTA. So here are the 3 questions. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Carlos. So these are the questions for you all, for the members to discuss, or if you want, there's any one of them that speaks to you. So first is, given what Innovate 680 program has focused on to date, what additional technical areas of focus should this CMCP identify? Second question is, what additional corridor issues or needs do you see from a system performance and our end user perspective? And lastly, are there any technical areas that your agency is currently prioritizing or focusing on, such as safety through your local Vision Zero efforts? And that's the last slide before questions and comments. So maybe we can take down the slide so we can see each other. So yeah, any of those 3 questions, if 1 or 2 or 3 speak to you, please feel free to chime in. And I'm gathering input from you all.
Okay, and why don't we just start so let's just start with the first question. Given what the Innovate 680 program is focused on to date, what additional technical areas of focus should this CMCP identify? Karen, do you have anything on that question, or if you have a different response to another
No,
question?
that question's fine.
Okay.
It was about the, I know the IHT, the Iron Horse Trail was mentioned about crossings, but I'm trying to figure out how we integrate with, as we have more and more e-bikes and e-scooters, et cetera, the concept of having this parallel path along the Iron Horse Trail for those vehicles that are faster.
Well, and with that, I was just going to throw in before Stephanie responds, and I am hoping to set aside, I've got about $500,000 in parks money to be used in the San Ramon area, that I want to start the design of a bike separated trail, because that's something I've been really pushing for on the Iron Horse Corridor. Doesn't resolve the conflicts of the street crossings, but it does at least avoid some of the conflict that we have with regard to pedestrians. And then, of course, we did do, right during COVID, a whole study, the Iron Horse Corridor as well, to see where we have the capacity to get that going as well.
So I don't know if that fit into this question or not, but that
Not entirely. I was just throwing that in there, but with the,
because we are within a mile, and she kept talking about 1 mile from the freeway.
Yeah, no, the Iron Horse Trail is definitely on the radar, as it is a regional trail, parallels much of 680, and that's a good comment. Yeah, my job here is to really gather your comments. I don't have answers to all.
Right.
Yeah, so that's really helpful.
That's why I threw it out.
Yes, thank you. I'm jotting that one down. Thank you.
Okay, Carwin, let's go to you, and then we'll go to Sue.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, I think it's really important to have the equity piece, especially because most of the people that are going to be on the road the most, they can't afford to pay, to get into the express lane. Maybe they're not taking BART. So I just wanted to emphasize, I think it's really important to focus on that with this component as well.
Great. Okay, thank you. And what about you, Sue?
So I had a couple things. One, we talked about the Iron Horse Trail with electric bikes and so on. And I think that goes along with the EV charging, not only for cars, but also for bicycles. I have an electric bike and it goes 40 miles, but if I take it down somewhere, I'm going to have to charge it to get back home. So it's just one of those thoughts where, and the same thing along the corridor on electric vehicles. I mean, they're getting more and more of them. And I'm not as familiar because I just charge at home or charge locally, so I don't end up using it, but that's going to be more and more important going forward. And then I think the other, concept that I think we have to think about on congestion management is, where's the potential to move people from individual cars to transit, whether it be BART, whether it be bus, whether it be carpools, using mobility hubs, whatever. I think that's going to be a super important piece to think about as well when it comes to these projects.
Great, thank you, Sue. Other commission members who have something they'd like to put on with the first question. I'm not sure if second question will trigger other additional responses, which is, what additional corridor issues or needs do you see from a system performance and or end user perspective? And Sue, I know you covered a lot of those things. Did you have anything else?
I feel like I covered both of those.
Okay, and so if anyone else has any other issues, I mean, we've covered a lot of those things. And I think to your point, Sue, of getting more people out of their cars, having the convenient park and rides, ensuring sort of the whole last mile that we've all been talking about for so long. And as we try to get people utilizing more of our transit, such as our buses, that's going to be just as critical as it is with BART. Other comments on that question? Okay, well, I'm going to read off the third question and see if that triggers any additional comments or thoughts. Are there any technical areas that your agency is currently prioritizing, focusing on, such as safety through local Vision Zero efforts? And we know a lot of cities in the county have adopted Vision Zero. Certainly, bicycle safety, separation of lanes, things like that. Other things that your cities might be working on. Sue, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things we're working on right now are intersection improvements for crossing. We've been paying for crossing guards for years, and it's getting to the point where that may not be financially doable. And, you know, unless there's other source of fundings for crossing guards. So we're looking at, you know, technical ways to improve those intersections, whether they be speed humps, lighting, things like that. So that's I think a big factor. And a lot of our areas are obviously a mile within 680. So, but we're spending quite a bit of time over the next year looking at numerous intersections to see if we can improve crossing safety for bikes and peds.
Okay, terrific. There are a lot of interesting engineering solutions, and it's interesting as an aside, because I'm going to throw it out there. Because I go back and forth to Hawaii quite a bit. Oh, Hawaii now uses speed humps on major highways. When it's coming, like if you're driving down the Pali Highway, or if you're on Kamehameha Highway on the North Shore, just in an effort to slow down as you're coming towards schools or others, even though it's, you know, people are flying at 50, 60 miles an hour, you're finding we've got speed humps right there. So we all sort of grew up with this theory of you don't engineer things like that on major thoroughfares, but it's working in Hawaii.
Interesting. What do the first responders say? Because that's what the pushback we're getting from doing them on major thoroughfares is the impact to the first responders.
And I don't know, you know, this is more anecdotal. I haven't asked first responders in Hawaii. I know you certainly can design the speed humps, you know, so that you can get the chassis of a fire engine over it because it's a little bit wider than a car. I have not seen that feedback in the media either, but I find it very interesting that it seems to be working.
Well, yeah, and the other interesting thing I think with the speed humps that we're looking at is putting at an intersection, putting a stop sign and then a speed hump after the stop sign before they get to the intersection, so they can't hit the gas and take off from the stop sign.
Yeah, no,
and that's an interesting technique that I haven't seen before versus speed bumps just to slow people down. So,
yeah, interesting. Okay, Karen, town of Danville.
Sorry, I just have to comment on that because you're going a lot faster on a highway. And when you go over speed bumps with low cars, they're going to go flying and they're not expecting it. It's going to break up cars. It's going to have the same effect as those potholes that we had on January 1st. People just were so upset by it.
No, they do have warnings. And so,
I understand you're just saying, let's look at it. So you have a right to say that, but I'm not on this wavelength right now.
No, and I'm not suggesting on major, I was just anecdotally noting that cities in Hawaii are using them on really major highways where you are going, where maybe you might see it in the Danville area is Diablo Road. We've always told people, nope, we'll never put a speed hump out there. But when you come up to a intersection, who knows? Maybe we're going to need to do something like that to slow down. And I like Sue's idea of right after a stop sign, so you don't have someone blowing a stop sign and then speeding on and not noticing a small child walking across the street right there. But I'm sure all the traffic engineers are like, no, don't even go there. But nevertheless, it's something to think about. Okay, other responses to the questions put forth by Stephanie. Okay, Stephanie, you got a little feedback. Hopefully from more of the TAC, you might get some more suggestions or concerns that have been raised.
Yep. And then, like I said, we'd be going to the public, so there'll be more opportunities to, if you think of something, please let us know. The engagement is supposed to happen throughout the process. So thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for the feedback.
Great. Okay. And so this is now our final opportunity. Any additional feedback or comments for future agenda items, things you want more feedback on, things we've discussed tonight where you think I really would love to learn more, or other issues that you've seen around this topic or as you travel on 680? We're a quiet bunch. So no, I don't. Oh, Sue's got something. Okay, unmute, Sue. Tell us what you've got.
When we're talking about bus on shoulder and things like that, it's interesting. And Bill Churchill's on here, so he could tell the story because I found this super interesting. But thinking about how changes are impacted, Bill's probably heard me repeat his own story like 10 times already. But you know, we County Connection, I still on County Connection, so I keep saying we, but County Connection had express bus from Walnut Creek BART down to Bishop Ranch. And that express bus is only at what, 34%, something like that, Bill? And then yet the Walnut Creek BART to Bishop Branch with all the stops is at 84% of pre-COVID levels. So a really interesting change in patterns of use. And I think it's really important as we're gathering all this data that we really understand and make adjustments and not think that we're just returning to pre-COVID transportation modes and in patterns. And sorry, Bill, if you can correct me on my data, but I found that to be really interesting. I think it's really important as we go forward with a lot of these ideas that we really look at what post-COVID transportation and people using transportation are really doing versus pre-COVID levels.
No, well, and it's a good point. Were any of you at Representative DeSaulnier's transportation forum on Tuesday night? It was in San Ramon. I was or Monday night, I'm sorry. I was at First Five, but I had my chief of staff there, and it was interesting. Apparently, Mark, to a lot of comments about traffic and transportation, it was people are working from home. That's changing the whole landscape, and if more people work from home, which he was encouraging, you would have far fewer traffic and transportation issues. So I think, Sue, your point is well taken. We still haven't completely reached the whatever equilibrium we're going to reach post-COVID as to what our transportation needs are going to be. But Bill, did you want to comment at all on what Sue said? Well, you're muted, but you shake your head.
He can't unmute. He's saying he can't unmute.
Oh,
I think
okay,
you have to
here,
make
I'm going to
a
ask
co-host or something to be able to unmute him.
I'm
There we go.
unmuted now.
There you go.
Yeah.
I apologize. I wasn't able to unmute myself. So a couple of things, and Sue, you're exactly right. Post-COVID, there have really been some pretty dramatic shifts in the way passengers are using public transit. The commute services are still significantly down, and most commute services are at about 30% returned from pre-COVID numbers, but our regular base core services are closer to 84%. And it's a really stunning thing when you look at what's going on. So the commute routes between Walnut Creek and Bishop Branch are operating right at about 30%. But there is a route called the Route 21 that goes from Walnut Creek BART as well, all the way down to the San Ramon Transit Center. But it takes the main streets. So it's winding its way through Alamo and Danville and San Ramon. And that particular route is over 84% of pre-pandemic numbers. So, we just need to be thoughtful of the shift in patterns and ridership as we move forward and consider these types of projects. That doesn't mean, though, in my mind, that Bus on Shoulder is not a worthy project. I still believe it's a very worthy project. And in particular, as we begin to really look at other express routes, in particular, the one that we're looking at from Amtrak that would go all the way down into Dublin, I think we want to look for opportunities where we give advantages to the bus over the regular car. So I do think that it's something that we need to consider, and certainly County Connection is a partner with CHP and 2CTA and everybody else. The other thing that's interesting is 2CTA or County Connection staff has been very involved with the San Diego MTS staff from an operational perspective as they deploy their pilot project. So for years now, we've been in communication with them. We've been watching their project. We've been looking at their training systems and manuals. So we're actually pretty close, and our staffs are pretty close. And so I do think that we will be able to take away a lot of lessons that they have and not duplicate and reinvent the wheel, so to speak. So, they're really helping us get much further down the road with a lot less investment than we would have otherwise had to make.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers or helps or adds to the conversation or not, but Those are my
Appreciate it.
thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts on things we should be having on future agendas beyond commissioners? Any of you who are here as attendees, anything you'd like to see us discussing more or flesh out just a bit more? Okay, I am not seeing anything. So that takes us to whether or not we have any public comment on any of this item, particularly written comments, Terry Ann, on this or anything else we've missed.
No written public comment has been received.
Okay, well, that takes us to the end of our agenda. And so we are going to be adjourned until October 11th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Thank you all for your help and attendance and participation.